All right, old friends, new friends, everyone in between, what is going on? Welcome to episode 1052, Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you to everyone out there, as always, for listening to the show, for watching, however you consume Talking Buffalo. I appreciate you very much. Also, a big shout out to today's sponsor, Sunny Reds, 1841 Abbey Road, just down the way from Highmark Stadium. If you're watching or listening to this on Wednesday, 50-cent wings. Wednesday nights, can't beat that. Thursdays, dollar chicken tenders. And I'm telling you, those are really good. They might even be better than the wings. So make sure you go check out Sunny Reds. All right, we're back to normal. I feel like my guest here, Matt Moran from SB Nation, I kind of been having you all over the place. Monday shows, Tuesday shows, different tapings. Back to our normal Wednesday podcast time slot. All feels right with the world. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Good. We finally got some nice weather here in Western New York. I got a sunburn this weekend, so back to normal.
Well, back to normal with a lot of rain coming up, by the way. So we're
Yeah.
recording this. I got to say this. I always do Tuesday, late morning, get it into lunchtime, just in case something nuts comes down the chute, which, you never know when it's going to. Yeah, it's been nice out. The rain is supposed to come all week, but it was a nice, enjoyable weekend. Get into that time of year where a lot of fun things are going on. And speaking of the NFL schedule, now by the time some people listen to this, we might already know, but there's lots of speculation. A little
Mhm.
bit later in the show, I outlined eight, I guess what I'll call under the radar, some more than others, talking points, kind of reflecting about the 2024 Buffalo Bills going into this season that I think, I don't know, some of them get glossed over. Some of them just flat out aren't really talked about enough at all. You and I are going to talk about some of them today. But back to the schedule stuff. As of this recording, the Bills are now officially out on any international games. So
Mhm.
we now know that that is not going to happen. All the teams, all the games have been officially announced now by the league, with the exception of one, which they're saving for Wednesday morning, which again, you'll wake up knowing that the Chargers game in Brazil, it's going to be the Chiefs. All reports indicate that it's definitely going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. But there was a lot of talk or speculation not too long ago about the Bills potentially playing Pittsburgh and Ireland. That's not happening. It's going to be the Minnesota Vikings who are going to Dublin. Um, Minnesota's actually playing international games back-to-back weeks. But anyway, I got it up on the screen, and I'm sure you know by now a lot of the international games. What is your initial thought here in terms of the Bills not having any international games? Most people seem to surely like it, except for those who are hoping to travel to Dublin or to London or Brazil or something like that. What are your thoughts when you see this and now you know the Bills will not be playing internationally?
The Dublin trip would have been the number one road trip of the year for sure
Oh yeah,
if it was the Bills in Pittsburgh. They were there 3 years ago in London, so it doesn't shock me that they weren't part of the international package this year, even though they had four opportunities to do it. If you look at that screen right now, there's no divisional games on that list as it currently stands, and so
yeah.
I thought it was unlikely that they were going to play the Jets or Dolphins. So that left the Browns and the Steelers. I thought the Steelers was kind of like a game that didn't make a whole lot of sense to put in that international game package. So I was really like, okay, if the Bills play the Browns in London, like that could make a little bit of sense. Um, but like I said, it didn't surprise me at all. I do think that it's interesting that we're going to see the Chiefs if we do end up seeing the Chiefs and the Chargers in that opening week spot, that both of their games will be featured games because their other game is on Christmas night, which I'm sure we're going to get to here in a second. Um, and so Oh no, that's Denver. Now, my bad. I thought that the Chargers and Chiefs were on Christmas for a second, but I mean, there's so many different rumors flying around. I just get
Sure.
confused sometimes. So, it doesn't surprise me at all if it would be the Chiefs in that Week One game and have it be a divisional game because you get all that extra prep to travel out there, and then you get extra rest when you get home. So it's not as cumbersome to put a divisional game on that opening weekend in Brazil on Friday night. So you see the rest of them aren't divisional games, but that opening one could be.
Right. To me, I look at again the schedule still has to officially come out, and we'll know tomorrow or today where and when they're playing in what order. I feel like as a W, as a Bills fan, I do understand that again if you were looking to travel to, internationally, you would be hoping for that. I think anybody else, I feel like any fan base feels the exact same way too. Like if you're somebody who likes to go to a road game and you want to make a vacation out of it, a true vacation and go overseas, you'd be hoping for it. But I think there's 31 other fan bases that probably feel the same way. If you're not traveling, well, you know what? That's not completely accurate. I just thought of something in real time. That's not really true. If you're the home team and you're losing a home game in your home
Yeah,
stadium because you're going internationally, that's one thing. But if you're a road team, maybe you're better off. Like, let's just say they're not. It wasn't going to happen. It was never going to happen. Let's just say they were playing the Chiefs. I feel like maybe you'd rather play them in London than go to Arrowhead. You know what I mean? And
maybe.
play them
Yeah,
or Philly or a team like that if that was on your schedule. But
it's
uh,
also like a 9:30 a.m. start for all of the games
that
except for
shit
the Brazil
sucks.
game. And so like 9:30 a.m. on a Sunday in Buffalo, like I mean, you've been to enough tailgates and enough parties over the years to know that folks start like, it's like 6 a.m. on Sundays for even a 1 o'clock game. And so, for a 9:30 game, it really cuts down on some of that pre-game time. The other thing I
Yeah.
wanted to mention about the road trips this year is that I was putting together my conversation post for Buffalo Rumblings for Friday. We do a weekend, like, just kind of
Yep.
comments based post where folks like weigh in on their takes. And it was all about the schedule release this weekend. And I was really struggling to figure out like what the best road trip is going to be this year.
Mm.
Because yes, there are a lot of Bills fans in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so it's always kind of like a reunion game when the Bills play in Carolina, but also a lot of Bills fans and a lot of Buffalo people go to Charlotte or stay, in Charlotte, on a regular basis because there are so many expats there. Atlanta being like, another away game kind of destination, like not exactly like my favorite city in the world, but like there's still some cool stuff to do. Houston, we've been there, like, and then you're talking about like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, like places we go all the time. So it's, or at least a lot of Buffalonians go all the time. So like there's not a lot of like really sexy road trips this year. So adding that international game would have really upped the stakes on at least one travel game this year.
Sure. The road games, New Jersey, Miami, New England, Cleveland, not a lot of travel, a lot of East Coast stuff here.
Yeah,
Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Carolina, and Houston. If I were to go to a road game this year, it'd probably be Charlotte. I'd stay with
probably.
Joe Marino. I'd stay with Joe Marino. Joe Marino doesn't know that yet, but I probably would stay with Joe. He lives in Charlotte, of course. A lot of people know that. Yeah, I understand because we're still spending time talking about the Bills' schedule and stuff like that. And a lot of people are like, "Well, who gives a shit? You know who they're going to play. You know where you're going to play them, or at least now you do with the international games now out." I used to feel that way till I moved to Florida. And then when I moved to Florida, I realized I want to watch the Bills go play a couple times a year, especially in Miami. I couldn't wait. I mean, I literally couldn't wait for the schedule to come out because I immediately would be thinking about the Miami game when the tickets go on sale, and I would go because I did go a couple consecutive years to Miami. But for people who like to go to games, it's never too early to start planning and you start figuring out dates and what it might conflict with. People got weddings coming up, their holidays or times they can't travel. So I completely and
Yeah.
utterly get why people care so much about the schedule, even if you already know who they play. Back to the Bills in terms of their schedule, and we'll see how it plays out on Wednesday in terms of like when they have a bye, what teams have a bye that'll be coming off and playing the Bills, the extra rest factor, the stretches of 3 road games in 4 weeks, things like that. I remember last year the consensus was just an absolutely brutally hard start to the season for the
Hmm.
Buffalo Bills. I still remember we did a live show. It was Sale's house. Sale Capaccio did a live show at Sports City Pizza Pub, a Bills season preview. And I was on that. There were a lot of guests there, and I remember Josh Reed from Channel 4 saying his hot take was the Bills were going to start 6-2. And I remember thinking to myself, "You're fucking crazy. The Bills are not starting 6-2 with that schedule." The Bills started 6-2, and that was despite losing in weeks 4 and 5. They were only, I believe, 3-2 after week 5, and then
Yep.
they just, they went on that roll. But what I like about this schedule is, and we knew the home teams for the international, with the exception of the Chargers in Brazil, that was just recent. But I love the fact that the Bills got 9 games at Highmark Stadium. Let's not
Hmm.
forget, they didn't lose a single game in Highmark Stadium last year. That could be a bonus under the radar talking point, by the way, for later on. But this team was literally unbeatable in their stadium. So to not have to use a home game playing in London or Brazil or Spain or anywhere else, to me that's really good news for the Bills to having 9 games at the stadium. And of course, their final season in that stadium.
They're also playing by far a much more difficult home schedule than they
Oh,
are a road schedule. I mean,
yes.
the teams that are coming to Orchard Park, I mean, it's a who's who of playoff teams from last year. So it's a much better home schedule if you're thinking about going to a game this year. And by the way, single game tickets go on sale Wednesday night right after the schedule is released. So
Yeah.
I mean, to your point, like when you're trying to plan your fall, if you need to get tickets as part of that plan, like that's why the schedule release is again so important and just like so different from what it was even a decade ago.
Yeah, and to your point, you're right. The home schedule, the teams they play with, like between Philly and KC and Baltimore and Cincy, um, getting to play those teams in Orchard Park in your home stadium as opposed to a neutral site where you're only technically the home team. That's gonna help the Bills this year. And like I said, that the road schedule, it doesn't feel that daunting right now. I hesitate to say that shit though, because you never know. Like if Washington was on the schedule last year, we would have laughed at this time of year. And look,
Mm-hmm.
Washington was in the NFC Championship game. You know what I mean? So you never know. You never know. Atlanta might be a great team. Pittsburgh,
Mm-hmm.
who the hell knows? But anyway, so that's what's going on with the Bills schedule. Denver at Kansas City. That is your Christmas night Amazon Prime game. Would you have liked to play it on Christmas night? We talked about this, Chris Ostrander on the show with me yesterday a little bit. Like, if you had to play on a holiday, I would have been good with a Christmas night game. They still could end up playing on Christmas, and I hate speculating because you're gonna know some people are gonna know by the time they watch this show.
Right.
But would you have liked a Christmas primetime game?
I mean, if I had my ideal situation, we wouldn't be playing on Christmas at all. But I mean, if I have to pick one, they've already gone through the whole Thanksgiving thing. I'd rather it be Thanksgiving, but they've played an every time slot and versus every opponent on Thanksgiving already. So Black Friday, like, does that count as a holiday? Like, I don't want them on Christmas. Let's be honest. I just do not want them on Christmas.
Sure.
I know that like you're listening to this in the future. I'm like 95% sure the Bills are going to be playing on Christmas at this point.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've seen most of the Eagles' schedule right now. They've got like 4 or 5 games already out there, so a lot of their premier games are already like listed. We know that the Chiefs are playing that night. The Bills are another ratings draw, and I
Yeah.
just think that like with the MVP on their team, I think they are a very like Netflixy candidate for Christmas, and so I think there's a very strong chance that the Bills end up on Christmas, but as all of our listeners like probably already know, like Netflix is releasing that schedule on Wednesday morning.
Yeah, I was gonna say it will be a Netflix game because the first 2 games are on
Yep.
Netflix for Christmas. It's not gonna be a Black Friday game. That's Chicago and Philly. I'm a superstitious person. I do not want to play on Thanksgiving. The last 2 times the Bills have played on Thanksgiving, yeah, sure, they've won the games, but they've lost the war because Trey White tore his
Yeah.
ACL in New Orleans, or yeah, it was his ACL in New Orleans, and then Von Miller tore his ACL in Detroit on Thanksgiving. So I'm perfectly good with no Thanksgiving game. So it's going to be Christmas pretty much or nothing. I always say it semi sarcastically. I wish the Bills could play 17 times Sunday at 1 p.m. I will tell you this though. I think the home games are a lot juicier, like the schedule, the slate. So there's a better chance for more 425 or primetime games. The
Yeah.
road schedule is just nowhere near is appealing. Although I'm sure there'll be one or two teams that probably, they get their one primetime game, like maybe Carolina. Who the hell knows? You know what I mean? We'll know tomorrow or today. But I think there's a chance. I think last year there was six, well, actually seven, because the final game was a 1 p.m. too. So 7 games were Sunday 1 p.m. I would expect at least that, maybe more this time around, especially since there's East Coast teams,
Mhm.
East Coast time zones that they're playing.
Right. They're playing at the Rams. They're playing at the Seahawks last year. Like they're
Yeah.
playing the Broncos. Like they were playing a lot of those West Coast teams last year, and so it makes sense that with all of these, like not to mention they have 9 home games versus 9 away games that they had last year. So there should be more than half their schedule at that 1 p.m. time slot on Sunday.
The only thing I could tell you right now that I could be really confident in saying before the schedule even comes out, or as we're recording this, I should say, is the Bills are going to be playing the Chiefs at home. It's going to be a Sunday 4:25 game, and it's going to be on CBS because CBS is a gazillion percent protecting that game, and it's been at 4:25 every year, or the last couple of years anyway. And I don't
And
see
they're
that.
probably going to broadcast. They're probably going to broadcast their preview show from there
Yeah.
too, just like they did last year. Bring the whole
Yep.
crew up to Buffalo. Get
Yeah.
Jim Nance on the set with the Bills fans behind him. Yeah, it'll be
Yep.
great.
Yep. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. Last season at the stadium. So
Yeah.
time to get excited already. We've spent a lot of time, or maybe not you, I certainly have on this show over the past handful of days, going into last week, talking about Gabe Davis. And,
Mhm.
just, it's that time of year, dude. What are you going to do? You got to find shit to talk about after the draft, before camp. And that's why we're spending this half a show almost talking about the NFL schedule, which comes out on the day most people are going to listen to this. But Gabe Davis is visiting the San Francisco 49ers. My thought, as we're recording this anyway, my thought is good for him. I hope it works out for him there. I just don't see a path to him. No, I shouldn't say that. It never felt completely sensible. I'm not gonna say realistic because it could be realistic. It just didn't feel sensible to me from Gabe Davis's standpoint to want to return to Buffalo. Not that he didn't love being here, not that
Oh
his
yeah.
teammates didn't love him. He was a captain. He was productive. He was a polarizing figure with the Bills, just because I think of the standard that he was held to after that Chiefs playoff game where he was literally unstoppable. But anyway, you look at this team and what they have at wide receiver, the Bills, and it just where was he going to fit in? That was a real
Right.
mystery. And there's other teams, Frisco obviously being one of them. I think that have Pittsburgh possibly, that have bigger needs. And just if you're Gabe Davis, why would you want to come back to Buffalo? Nothing against the Bills, of course. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. If they didn't have Josh Palmer on this team, it would make a lot more sense. But obviously, they signed Palmer kind of early in free agency. I don't think they're going to be like, getting rid of him anytime soon just to bring back Gabe Davis. So I think Pittsburgh's in play for him. The 49ers are definitely in play for him. And I think he has a chance to have a really good bounce back season. He played most of the season last year hurt. The Jaguars actually released him with a failed physical designation, so because he's still recovering from that torn meniscus. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he doesn't even sign with the 49ers now that he's visiting them in May, and it waits like, another month, or maybe it's right before training camp, that he actually can pass a physical and sign somewhere, because it's only been about 6 months for him. And so that's kind of what the recovery time is for that torn meniscus.
It's funny with Gabe Davis too. Sometimes it feels like we talk about like he would be like a Mari Cooper or DeAndre Hopkins. One of these guys has been around forever. And that's not the case with Gabe. Gabe just
Oh,
turned 26 years old in
uh-huh.
the beginning of April, like barely a month ago. So he's still young. He's potentially got a lot of good football left in him. I wouldn't hate him being a Buffalo Bill. I'd be out for camp if he were to sign with the Bills, just for the sake of it. Like, who would be potentially the odd man out if it's not Gabe? And I land on Curtis Samuel.
Right.
Although cutting him, you're only saving like 400K and you're eating like 8 million or something like that in dead cap. So that would be a big financial windfall for the Bills to cut him. And that's why I don't see it happening. Plus, Gabe Davis is the Bills need guys who can get open better, separate better. That seems to be their weakness. And you're going to bring a guy in who's kind of got a Keon Coleman ish skill set. I think Gabe's a little bit of a better blocker, a more accomplished blocker, but I don't know. I just don't see the fit for Gabe Davis, and I haven't seen it this entire process. Not since he left and he drafted Keon Coleman.
If they had released him back in March, like that would be one thing. But I think the Jaguars releasing him now is, does rule out the Bills. As far as like the cash stuff of Curtis Samuel, like there would be some sort of offset by whoever signs him this year. I would assume that the Bills wrote that into the contract, that there's, his guaranteed
Mm,
salary would be offset by whatever anyone paid him. But his salary is $7 million. Like I don't see another team paying him that much for one season if the Bills have already paid that to him. So
okay, yeah. All right, let's get into. We'll at least get through one or two of these before we get to a break.
okay.
I came up with 8 kind of low-ish, low-key talking points with the Buffalo Bills. Things that we don't talk about that much. Like, Josh Allen winning MVP, falling short in the playoffs, investing so much in the defense. Those are the big talking points, as they should be, all of them. But I think there's some things that are pretty significant about this team that I don't know. And some people might say maybe I'm wrong and they don't fly under the radar. I just personally kind of feel like they do. I want to get your thoughts on each of these as well. And they're not, these are random. They're not necessarily in a countdown in the most, low key talking points. Some of them are positives, a couple of them are kind of negative things about the team. I want to start with the division. And I just don't think it's talked about enough how much the Bills just, and I'm not talking about winning the AFC East every year. We know that. But the Bills just absolutely dominate this division when they play inside the division. The Bills are 24-6 in their last 30 games against the AFC East. And it's like, that's the equivalent of pretty much going 5-1. You're going and you're playing in your division and you know ahead of
Mhm.
time that you're going to be going 5-1 within the division every year. It's just, to me, that's just, again, it's utter dominance. And I just don't think it's talked about enough how much the Bills dominate when they play their opponents in the AFC East.
Yeah, and even if you go back and look at each one of those losses, you can point to like certain things that really pissed me off about each one of them. There was like the Miami loss in the Heat, YOLO Josh in week 1
Mhm.
against the Jets. There was the January 2025 game where they didn't have anything to play for against the Patriots. Josh took one snap. The Mac Jones drive, he drives the length of the field in the
Yeah.
2-minute drill, bag of milk, Mac Jones, come on. And then there was that stupid wind game where the Bills were like super conservative and let a 64-yard rushing touchdown through their defensive line when they knew the Patriots were only running the ball. So there's really only one game in there that was like frustrating, like almost the entire team, and that was the November game in 2022 against the Jets when they got 48 yards from anyone named not Josh Allen, and
Mm.
Josh threw 2 interceptions, and so like it really is like a very dominant performance over the last several years for the Bills. And that includes like the perfect game in the playoffs against the Patriots where they just like absolutely abused them on offense. And so I, at some point, the worm has to turn here, but I'm enjoying it right now for sure.
Yeah. And again, it just, you said it, some of these games they lost, the meaningless game last year, the 10,000-degree game in Miami and
Yeah.
yeah, that's just wow. But I tell you, of those, the one I think that sticks out to me the most that they lost was I think it was 2 years ago on opening night, Monday Night Football in New York. Josh
Yep.
Allen had maybe the worst game of his career. Certainly was up there. I mean, he was just dreadfully,
Yeah.
dreadfully bad, which may have started a little bit of that Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen riff because reportedly, anyway, it was speculated that Stephon got after Josh in the locker room after the game, and Josh pretty told him to shut the hell up. And he didn't use those words per reports. But anyway, yeah, it's just completely dominating the division the way the Bills have done to me it's just been really, really wild. All right, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break, come back on the other side, and we'll fly through a lot of these low-key Bills key talking points. Be right back. Man, I really love that. It's kind of like Sunny and Philly type jingle that it feels like that we go into break to. All right, so we're talking about low key Bills talking points. Like I said, some are good, some are bad. Let me get to one that is definitely bad. And again, this is just with so many things going on in the offseason, I just don't feel like this has been focused on enough. And look, maybe it was an anomaly. Certainly hope it was. The Bills not playing good defense in elimination games, that's not an anomaly. That's year after year after year. This happened this season. And I know the Bills, Josh Allen played well enough for the Bills to win. I know the Bills scored enough that had the defense played a little bit better, that they still win the game. But I still have an issue, and I don't think it's discussed enough, that offensive coordinator Joe Brady, in my opinion, at least anyway, had a semi meltdown in that AFC title game. Lots of things. The third, and these is again random. 3rd and 10 on your final drive, and you're throwing a bubble screen to Amari Cooper. I mean, that call just puzzles me when you got Shakir and other options or play calls. But that 3rd and 10 to Amari Cooper, that puzzled me. Of course, James Cook, and this is one thing that has been talked about, but James Cook not even getting a touch on the final drive of the game. Just not enough of a factor in a game where James Cook arguably might have been the best player on the Buffalo Bills. Borderline, again, unstoppable. That superhuman almost touchdown he scored where he just wouldn't go down on 4th down. Just lots of things. But James Cook not touching the ball near the end of the game. 4th and 5 play call, which I don't know if Josh will. I guess maybe we'll never know. But Kansas City blitz, they swarmed him and never really had a chance. And they still almost got lucky. Like Dalton Kincaid, that's not Joe Brady's fault. The ball hits Dalton Kincaid in his hands. He got to catch the goddamn ball.
Right.
But those play calls, their formations, their alignments, the fact that the Bills offense did literally nothing against Kansas City that all of us hadn't seen throughout the year. Forget about Steve Spagnuolo and the Chiefs staff and the players. I'm talking about us as content creators and fans. The Bills did absolutely nothing that you hadn't seen already this year. No new wrinkles, no new nothing. The tush push was getting stopped and kept doing it anyway. It just, I thought it was an absolute nightmare performance. Again, a semi meltdown for me from Joe Brady.
Yeah, I mean, the big story coming out of the game, which makes this a little bit underrated, is that it was the most points that the Chiefs scored the entire season last year, right? Like the Chiefs had topped out at 30 points. They did that twice. They scored 29 points once, but they had never gone over 30 points. And so Sean McDermott and the Bills defense allowing Kansas City to score 32 points was, I think, the big story that came out from that game. And then we saw them absolutely get smoked by the Eagles defense in the Super Bowl as well. And so over and over, we just had that conversation of the defense sucked. The defense sucked. You saw the NFL draft, like the Bills have talked about it, but we didn't talk about that offensive stuff. And so I do think that this is a really good pick for underrated story. There was, like you said, we don't really know what happened on that 3rd and 10 bubble screen, if it was a check from Josh Allen or if it was the actual call for the play. You can argue with that as much as you want. It was 3rd and 10. The Bills needed to get 10 yards. They didn't. The James Cook thing is very interesting to me because I do think that it's more of a philosophical conversation than Amari Cooper's bubble screen. The Bills get the ball with 3 minutes and 33 seconds left, and they go into their 2-minute offense, which means Ty Johnson's in the game because James Cook doesn't pass block, right? This is our 3rd down offense. And so we get the Ty Johnson run. I think he loses a yard or maybe even makes it back to the line of scrimmage. I can't remember. But that's the reason Cook wasn't on the field for that final drive, is because despite it being 3.5 minutes left and having all 3 timeouts, the Bills went into their 2-minute drill. And so I don't think they needed to do that. They could have kept James Cook on the field and run their regular offense with 3.5 minutes left, with 3 timeouts left. They could have just run a normal offense and tried to take as much time off the clock as possible while scoring. But they went into that, we got to pass it. I mean, they did run it on the first play, but then after that, it was a Josh Allen, scramble and then pass. Right. So they went into the 2-minute offense, which is why James Cook was off the field. should they have changed who they are in that instance? Should they have got, like, I disagreed that they needed to go to the 2 minute offense. And so there's a lot of things that play there why Cook was off the field on the final drive.
That's very fair. For me, I guess I continue to go back to Greg Rizzo talking about after the season was over. I can't remember if it was in the locker room or if it was later on that week, but I do remember vividly Greg Rizzo and him not being the only player, but talking about the Chiefs did things on offense that they hadn't seen before, that they weren't prepared for. That's what I'm talking about. In a prize fight, in the big money fight, Kansas City is throwing wrinkles at the Bills that the Bills were flat out not prepared for. And I get it on defense. And this isn't really, again, this isn't even supposed to be a discussion of the defense, but I get it. Christian Benford going down, that hurt them. The Bills played a lot of man, but whatever. The Chiefs ran things that the Bills weren't prepared for. And this isn't you and I speculating that. This is the star defensive end who just signed a long-term extension with the Bills. That's him coming out and saying that. Meanwhile, everything the Bills did on offense just felt predictable. It came down to execution. Like, we're not changing who we are. We're going to do this. We're going to execute. Stop us if you can. That kind of felt like Joe Brady's mantra when like you said, Ty Johnson is your 2 minute offensive guy, and you're right, 100%. You're right, but maybe change that. Maybe get James Cook out in the flats and get him the ball, even if it's a sure passing situation. And you don't have James Cook pass blocking because you got him in a route, going out for routes. There's just things they could have done that they didn't. I just feel like it was a very bad performance from Joe Brady. The Bills offense still scored and they still had some success. But again, Josh Allen made a couple incredible throws, that long pass to Matt Collins. James Cook could have gotten stopped on fourth down. They would have came away empty. And he found his way. He willed his way into the end zone. I just don't think Joe Brady was an asset to the Bills when they needed him to be. And it's something we usually talk about every year with the defense melting down against the Chiefs, or the 1 year with the Bengals. So I got
and
that on the good. You what?
They did. The defense also melted down. But yeah, the Bills were 5-14 on third down. So, like, in the biggest moments, they stepped up on fourth downs, but if they didn't step up on fourth downs, they would have been absolutely screwed. 5 of 14 on third down sucks. And over again, you didn't get your guy making a play outside of James Cook willing himself into the end zone and Matt Collins, just mossing the dude, for that score. So, they just didn't have it from players stepping up, and I don't think they did have it from their offensive coordinator stepping up, and that really surprises me. I want to say, because Sean McDermott, we talk a lot of times about how Sean McDermott learns from his mistakes, but he has to make all these mistakes in order to learn from them. He went to a Super Bowl with Carolina. He knows that you have to change it up in the prize fights. He has been to these levels before, and so not having that kind of next step in your plan, I don't think there's a whole lot of excuse for it.
Yeah, and it's not that I don't think they prepared to be different. I'm going to be so corny with this assessment, but going back to Rocky 2, okay? So you go to Rocky 2. Rocky narrowly loses to Apollo Creed in the first fight. In the second fight, Mickey is trying to train him to be A, faster and quicker, and B, not box southpaw, go back to, actually, was it Apollo in Rocky 3? Oh, hell, I don't remember. But what I do remember is Rocky, for a while, it was Rocky 3, actually. It was Rocky 3, and Apollo was training him to also fight, right-handed, traditional. And about halfway through the fight, Rocky says, no, hell no, I'm going back to southpaw. And that's what he did. He fought the rest of the fight the way he always has. That's a dumb analogy, but it kind of, it hammers home my point that when all the chips were on the table, the Bills just went to what they do and stop it if you can. Like I said, I got
it was Rocky 2. It was Rocky 2. I looked it up.
Right, it was because he caught the chicken, man. He caught the chicken when he was training. Yeah. Now you got speed. That was Mickey being all excited about him. We didn't give a shit. At the end of the fight, speed didn't matter. Fighting the other hand, none of that shit mattered, man. It was just Rocky being Rocky. And I kind of feel like that's what Joe Brady tried to be, and it didn't work. At least that shit worked the second time around for Rocky Balboa. Anyway, next point. And I think some people can argue that that this isn't under the radar. I feel like maybe I personally have kept this narrative alive this entire offseason. But Keon Coleman, who had a lot of promise early in the season, he had some good stretches, some flash plays, 3 catches for 22 yards in 3 playoff games. That is, again, his age, the fact that he's a rookie, I get all that, man. You can't get too down on a player after one season, especially a guy who got hurt and maybe he never had to come back from an injury before and he struggled with that. But come on, dude. 3 catches for 22 yards in 3 playoff games. Could have really used, he had 1 catch for 12 yards in that AFC title game. And if you haven't figured this out yet, folks, I grade on a curve now. To me, what you do in January far more determines, in my opinion, what kind of player you are than what you do in October and November against the Tennessee Titans and the Carolina Panthers of the world. I got a lot more judgment on what you do when it matters. Keon Coleman, 1 catch for 12 yards in that Chiefs game. I just don't think it's talked about enough how much Keon Coleman struggled. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you disagree, and maybe people listening are going to disagree and say that it's talked about plenty. It's certainly a big talking point. I kind of felt like it was a little bit under the radar, but maybe it's not.
Brandon Beane did talk about it at his end of season press conference. Whether it's Coleman being injured, whether it's Coleman hitting that rookie wall, I think that Beane, he often says things by just kind of touching it and not like hammering it over the people's heads. But he did say that Coleman needed to work on his rehab and conditioning. So if that's really what that was, and it was like him working back from his injured wrist still from early November all the way through January, or if it was him hitting that rookie wall, maybe that's the wake up he needs, plus his GM calling him out publicly to hopefully turn that around. But they know that more in the building than we do out here. But I do think that, I don't know if it was top of mind for a lot of people, but I do think that there were a lot of concerns about Keon Coleman coming out of the 2024 season that were talked about. That was one of the reasons why some folks were riding the wide receiver train, perhaps. I don't want to get, it's just Brandon Beane listening to your podcast. I don't want to get in trouble here. So,
yeah. Let me ask you a sidebar question here quickly.
Sure.
Not related to this, but kind of related to this. Not a low-key talking point, but a question to you. What is your, right now in May, beginning of May, what's your confidence level? Let's say a scale of 1 to 10, and you can use a fraction point if you want to, but what's your confidence level when it comes to Keon Coleman going into year 2?
Well, I mean, obviously that's based on whatever your expectation is of him. Like, do I expect that he's going to top his performance from last year and get like, say, 30 plus catches for 600, yards? Yeah, I do think, I'm pretty confident that he's going to do better than that. Just even if he plays like, a couple more games, he should be doing better than that. So I'm fairly confident he's going to have a solid season. I don't have an expectation that he's going to develop into a number 1 receiver. And so if he's like a solid number 2 receiver in that 750 yards range, 5 touchdowns, like 40 something catches, like that's I'm pretty confident that he's going to be able to do that in this offense with Josh Allen as his quarterback. If you're asking me if he's going to be 1,000-yard receiver, no, I don't think that. So I'm pretty low confidence on that.
Yeah, a lot of meat left on the Keon Coleman conversation bone. We'll pick that up. We'll have plenty of opportunity to do that. I want to get to some of these others. All right, next one for me. Look, we've talked about, a lot how historically great the Bills' offense was last year, and it's absolutely certainly was. 30 touchdown passes, 30 rushing touchdowns. To me, the low-key point, which I thought was really cool, and it kind of just, it supports, I guess this is a supporting actor award. Like we talk about everybody eats. That's obviously become a mainstay among Bills talk now, but 13 guys caught a touchdown pass. That's either an NFL record or it's tied for an NFL record. I can't remember, but to have a season where 13 guys or catch a touchdown pass, to me, was pretty incredible. And I remember people wanted Quentin Morris to score, or Reggie Gilliam. I think it might have been Reggie Gilliam near the end of the year. I think they designed a pass play for him. It didn't work, but near the end of the season, they designed a pass play. So they were cognizant of that. But yeah, 13 guys catching a touchdown. That's an incredible achievement to me.
There was some talk about maybe designing a tackle eligible for Deion Dawkins too. So yeah, I mean, Reggie Gilliam, Zach Davidson, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling were the 3 that like could have tipped it to the edge. I do think it was tied for an NFL record, not an actual NFL record. But yeah,
Yeah.
we go back to the everybody eats, philosophy, and like Matt Collins is your leading touchdown, receiver with 5 receiving touchdowns. Like that's a good and bad thing. Obviously, they were going with his big frame, his box out ability on a lot of those passes. But like we really do need more production out of your top wide receivers. If 5 passing touchdowns from your special teams guy is the leading touchdown receiver.
Yeah, agreed. But again, the everybody eats thing
Yeah,
that really lends credence to it. By the way, all these, with the exception of the last one, to me are definitely positives with the Bills.
yeah,
All right, so another factor, and this is, you could have said this 2 years ago too. And I think people recognize it. I just don't think they talk about it enough. Josh Allen played 17 games, even though he had a cup of coffee in the last game, but whoever, he played every game. Who gives a shit? He got sacked 14 times all season long. 14, that's it. Now, some of it is, the occasional miraculous escapability of Josh Allen, who does, things that very, very few quarterbacks ever have been able to do. But this offensive line for the Buffalo Bills last year, under the radar, a great, great unit between Josh not getting sacked, Josh having an MVP season, James Cook tying O.J. Simpson's record, just being balanced, the points, the way they scored touchdowns, just all kinds of things. This was a great offensive line. To me, the biggest low-key strength of this football team, I think, is, for the last 2 years now, has been the offensive line. But yeah, Josh getting sacked 14 times in a season, it's fucking ridiculous. I think Rob Johnson might have gotten sacked 14 times in a game. It felt like that anyway back in the day. But yeah, talk about the offensive line, dude. It's just great, man, and kind of flown under the radar for the last few years.
Beane has talked about this several times on recent podcasts and radio hits. How they build that offensive line to protect Josh Allen, both for this
Mhm.
current year and for like the length of his career, to try to keep him healthy into his 30s. And they've done a great job assembling some talent. The same front five is coming back. Starting five is coming back this year. They only had one game missed by a starter in the last 2 years, and Spencer Brown was down for one game in 2025. And I think it was Ryan Vandermark came in and had a really solid game. So when you can do that kind of consistency, not have guys hurt, not be shuttling guys in and out of the lineup because of ineffectiveness, like it really does help Josh. At the same time, they're doing good play design. Josh is, being decisive with the ball. He's not holding on to it too long to try and hero stuff up either. But when he needs to, he can put on that cape and do that as well. So it really is a perfect confluence of like 4 or 5 different things that lead to just 14 sacks in 17 games.
Sure. Next point, we talk a lot about Terrell Bernard, who got a 4-year extension. He's locked in. He's a captain on this team, man. He's a leader now of this defense. Matt Milano, they redid his deal, 1-year deal at this point. He could be a free agent after the season, but his return, big news. And now an off season where he hopefully remains healthy, you might see the old, or at least really, really close to the old Matt Milano, ideally. To me, an underrated part of last season is Dorian Williams. I thought Dorian Williams vastly, vastly improved from year one to year two. Um, it was obvious that Sean McDermott was not ready to have any trust in him whatsoever. And if you disagree with that, you could just go back to the playoff divisional loss against the Chiefs, where we talked about this a lot. AJ Klein comes off the couch away from vacation, and he's playing critical snaps before Dorian Williams. Fast forward to last year, I thought Dorian Williams held his own, and at a minimum held his own as a starter. And he was that third linebacker even when Milano was back. And if something happened to Matt Milano right now, and I sure hope it doesn't, but if it did, I would feel significantly better about Dorian Williams going into training camp as the starter than I did a year or so ago when Matt Milano got hurt before the season started and we had to, Dorian Williams became the starter. At the time, I was like, well, at least you got a couple of weeks. He's going to be the starter. He's prepared as the starter as opposed to it happening in season. Point being is this, dude. I just thought Dorian Williams made a big jump in year 2, and I feel a lot better about him now. I think that's a nice little low-key talking point about this football team.
Especially if you're talking about anyone that's not a Bills fan. Like the people on the outside have no clue who he is. I remember
Mhm.
when he was drafted in the 3rd round, I was like, man, that's a really like almost the same exact thing that I said about their 3rd round pick this year. But it's like, what's his path? Actually, their 2nd round pick this year. What's his path to playing time? He's going to
Yeah.
be behind Terrell Bernard. He's going to be behind Matt Milano. And I knew, Matt Milano was getting up there in age, but they had just signed him to that nice contract extension. Like, there wasn't really a clear path for Dorian Williams. And obviously, he's played a lot in his first few years, more than I expected him to play. So like you kind of start thinking like, oh, that's why they drafted a 3-tech defensive tackle who can also kick to 1-tech on pass rushing downs in the 2024 or the 2025 draft. So like I'm pleasantly surprised with Dorian Williams and how he has progressed since his rookie season. I didn't expect him to get that many snaps in his first 2 years. So, I mean, we're really in gravy territory as far as my expectations with Dorian Williams. He's far outpaced what I thought he was going to do.
Definitely. All right, second last one here. And if you are a longtime listener to Talking Buffalo, I would say over the course of the past 3, 4 years now, probably my number one thing that I beat, like a dead horse is when it comes to the Buffalo Bills and they lose ultimately, in the playoffs. I go all in on Ed Oliver. I just Bills, I say it every year with the Bills and the Chiefs. The difference between the Bills and the Chiefs is not Mahomes and Allen. It's
Right.
it's Chris Jones, it's Travis Kelce, it's the star players that step up at big times and make big plays for the Chiefs. And the Bills guys like Ed and Stephon Diggs when he was here, they just don't have their best games when it matters
Yep.
the most. I thought Ed Oliver 2 years ago in the Chiefs loss was atrocious and a no-show. I thought Ed Oliver when they lost to the Bengals the year before that was atrocious and a no-show. Somebody online said yesterday, I spent a good chunk of my Monday arguing with somebody who said Ed Oliver's underrated. I know he ain't underrated. He's a 9th overall pick of the draft, and he's got a 4-year, $68 million contract, and the Bills literally depend on him to be good. He's not underrated. That's ridiculous. Let me get off track here. Point being this, he has been atrocious when the Bills have needed him the most in these elimination losses. For me, a low-key talking point, because we talk about how bad this defense was against the Chiefs and how the season ended and them spending so much resources and money between a draft and free agency. Now, Ed Oliver played really, really good against the Chiefs in that AFC title game. He showed out. And that's a good takeaway for me. Maybe that's I don't know, just you would think a guy gets to a certain stage of his career and he doesn't really develop anymore. Again, they needed him to play big, and he did. I thought Ed Oliver was outstanding. One of the few players on defense that actually showed up against the Chiefs in Arrowhead. So to me, that's kind of a low-key talking point. Nobody's talking about that. We've been talking
Mhm.
about, what they've added to the defense and how they fell apart. But I thought Ed Oliver played great against the Chiefs. So I got that as
He did.
as a low-key talking point too.
He did. And heading into 2025, I just listened to Eric Wood with Chris Trapasso after their NFL draft
Mhm.
episode. And they talked about how you can game plan for one player on the interior of the defensive line. And the Bills may have not always had that second player. Like even when Daquan Jones was playing really well, he got hurt, came back for the playoffs, wasn't like at 100%. And so they think that having TJ Sanders next to him on those pass rush downs is going to give opponents another thing to game plan for on the interior of that defensive line and could really help Ed Oliver's production even more going into 2025 in those big moments. And so I'm looking forward to that because if we can get Ed Oliver 1-on-1 or like maybe 1.5-on-1 instead of 2-on-1, man, he could really like cause some havoc and really come into his own now. Obviously, we've seen the Bills throw more stuff at their defensive line. We'll get to that in a second. But I'm hopeful. Like,
um, yep. All right, let's get to that. Last point I had here, low-key kind of talking point. So Joe Bosa, Michael Hoyt, Larry Ogunjobi. I'm trying to go through this in my mind here. TJ Sanders, Landon Jackson, Deion Walker. Brandon Beane has worked really, really hard this offseason to kind of overhaul the defensive line. My last low
Again,
key talking point is I think he's doing that because Brandon Beane's 2023 offseason defensive line ads were pretty lousy. When you go back and you look a year later, what they did, whether it was I don't want to say there was no huge moves, but just all the ads that the change from the year before. Um, Casey Toohill, Austin Johnson, I might be forgetting a guy or two. Dewan Smoot. That was supposed to be a pretty significant addition. They brought back Quentin Jefferson. They brought back Jordan Phillips. They took Dwayne Carter. They traded down from round one in part to get a round 3 pick because they wanted to get another guy, and they took Dwayne Carter with that pick. Javon Sullivan, who did flash a little bit, and he was a 5th rounder, so I'm going to be careful of my expectations for a 5th round guy. But going through that list, dude, Toohill, Johnson, Smoot, Jefferson, Phillips, Carter. It was a pretty lousy, like what he brought into the 2024 season at defensive line didn't really do anything for the Bills other than a little play here, a little play there. Re-signing DaQuan Jones, you might want to add that in too, because I thought DaQuan Jones was not the same player last year that he was previously too. So a pretty lousy offseason last year when it came to the defensive line for Brandon Beane, and part of the reason why he's overhauled it again this year.
and I mean, they reworked Von Miller's contract in order to bring him back last year
Mm,
too. And so that
yeah.
was another, like, I mean, it's not an ad, quote unquote, but it's like they redid his
Sure.
deal in order to bring him back instead of
Yeah.
just cutting him. So yeah, they didn't work out. And we've seen this over and over again with Brandon Beane and the Bills defensive staff. I mean, I think we have to put it on, everybody's feet that folks aren't developing like Boogie Basham, or, folks are not kind of working out at that defensive line position. I, every year they bring in new people. Every year they keep taking bites at the apple. They keep working the same systems, and that's a good thing because like they're trying literally everything they can to solve this defensive line thing. They're not like staying away from say a veteran pass rusher like Joey Bosa just because Von Miller didn't work out. They're not saying we're not going to draft a guy in the 2nd or 3rd rounds because Boogie Basham didn't work out. So they're still going to those same wells to try to continue to address it, and I give them a lot of credit for doing that. But yeah, the reason they had to spend so many resources this offseason is because the stuff they did last offseason and really off seasons before that have not really panned out at that position.
You really you hit the nail on the head there too with the Von Miller. I kind of forgot about that. They did rework his deal so he could be back in Buffalo. And it was funny, a weird assessment in season for Vaughn because initially he started off the season. I thought he played really, really well early in the season. He got suspended, and in a way, I kind of almost felt like, and a lot of people did, that maybe that would be a good thing. A month of no wear and tear on his body. Why he got suspended for being a piece of shit, that's a whole other story. But the fact that he was suspended for 4 games, it was like that might benefit the Bills. Just like, Larry Ogunjobi, if he even plays now at this point. But some of those suspensions, I heard the argument that you're going to be healthier, with the Bills, the 2 guys who are going to miss the first 6 games of this year. But he came back and it never got ramped up again. And I kept saying, all right, well, fine. We're waiting for the playoffs.
The
Come
playoffs.
playoff
Mm-hmm.
time, Von Miller's going to play 55% of the snaps, and he's going to be hopefully an impactful player. Maybe he would have been, maybe he wouldn't have been. Who knows? But he didn't play to find out. He played like 25% of the snaps in the playoffs. It never added up to me. It never made sense. Is there anything that I forgot? Or do you think we pretty much covered the low-key talking points?
No, I think those are the low key talking points. I mean, we talk about so many like non low key talking points, the stuff that everybody hammers. That I do think that these were a lot of kind of the under radar things. The defensive line ads were kind of top of mind since they spent so much of their resources this offseason on
Mhm.
that. But it's not like I don't think we missed anything on I mean, I
I
think
got
plenty of
one.
people have talked about Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox last season. I think that's been talked about a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
that's highly
so like, I mean,
publicized.
yeah, there you go.
I got one though. It just
Okay.
kind of dawned on me while we were doing the show that I hadn't thought of before. I think Tyler Bass kind of turned it around in the back. If you remember, man, we were having
Yeah.
shows. People were talking, get rid of this dude. What's he going to look like against the salary cap if you cut him? They brought in a kickers to give him some form of competition. He looked
Yeah.
dreadful, but he kind of turned it around. So the fact that we're not even talking about Tyler Bass during offseason discussions, that definitely is something that flown under the radar that he did turn it around because we're not, talking about, well, who are the Bills going to bring in to challenge Tyler Bass? Should they draft a kicker? Things like that. So I should have added that one
Yeah,
as
that's a good one.
well.
They didn't even bring in an undrafted guy, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't remember. I
Right.
haven't looked through the rookie minicamp. It was Mother's Day weekend, but like we had lacrosse and stuff. But so I haven't looked at that. But yeah, they haven't really brought in any serious competition for him. And like Bills fans stopped chirping about him sometime in December. So at least if it wasn't
Yeah.
the big kick against Miami, everyone was talking about it. But like by the end of December, I don't think anyone was really talking about Tyler Bass anymore. That's a good one. I like that ad.
What do you think of this logo? So it was dropped on Tuesday here. It's the Bills, the final season logo. It's got farewell season on in 1973 to 2025. I like it. I think it's got like the Bills like Super Bowl era vibes. You know what I mean? Like 90s kind of vibes. What do you think of that logo?
I understand why the name Highmark Stadium is on there, but like we couldn't have had a couple different names on there in some way, shape, or form. Like I know they don't want to give any shine to Rich Foods right now, but I mean, like
Right, that's
it was
true.
called Rich Stadium for like so long, like 20 something years, and so like and then obviously it transitioned to Ralph Wilson Stadium, but like I just that was my first thought. It's like people still call it like Rich Stadium. Like we could at least like mention that somewhere in this logo.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of that. I never really thought of that when we were when we were looking at it. Two things, media things, real quick before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Rich Eisen is returning to ESPN. That was pretty big news announced, dropped on Monday. After 20 years gone, well, kind of returning to ESPN. He's going to be having his show, the Rich Eisen Show. Now it's going to be on ESPN. Part of that growing, like direct to consumer type
Hmm.
deal, where guys or women who don't have cable could still like get ESPN. You can subscribe to just ESPN and get the ESPN content, kind of like Pat McAfee show. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's going to be similar in that he's going to remain at NFL Network, like he's still going to do the game day. Which that was my first thought because I saw he's going to ESPN. I was like, oh damn, dude, I really liked watching Rich Eisen on NFL Network, but he's not leaving. He's still going to be there for that. So there was that news, and then Chris Berman, of course, an icon and a Buffalo Bills favorite too. Got an extension. If he lasts, God willing, long enough in the industry to do it, 50 years come 2029. He'd be the first ESPN employee ever to last 50 years. That'd be really cool. But those are some big names, some big media news to come out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got the Chris Berman like alert from I found Adam Schefter. I get Twitter alerts from him, and so I saw the Chris Berman thing, and my heart skipped a bit for a second because I was wondering if he was announcing something else. But when I saw that he was going to get to 50 years with this new contract, I was like, that's really cool. Obviously, like particularly in this day and age, folks bouncing all over the place. It's interesting to see guys who like with 50 years and just think about how ESPN has changed in those 50 years. So that was
yeah.
really cool. And then the Rich Eisen thing, I think, is super fascinating because he's going to be on at the exact same time as Pat McAfee, to your point. And so I think they're really appealing to two different types of fan
Yeah.
bases. Um, Eisen, kind of the older, kind of the more, I don't
Traditional.
know, traditional, I was going to say learned crowd, like, like a little bit less of the, making up random words and shouting into the microphone, more sleeves for Rich Eisen, I would think, than Pat McAfee. So I do think it's really interesting that they're both going to be on at the same time. Um, I also, and they haven't announced this part yet, but it would be really fascinating what that's going to mean for ESPN radio because their 12 to 3 spot is tenuous, let's say. And the show that they have on there, I can't even remember what it's called. And so putting if they're able to, they haven't announced it, like I said, if they slot him into that 12 to 3 on the radio waves, like I think that's a big boost for ESPN radio as well. And so obviously Eisen has a lot of respect around the industry and gets great guests and like his clips. I follow him. His clips are wonderful. So I'm really like intrigued by this. I mean, I didn't watch Rich Eisen on Roku. Did you watch Rich Eisen on Roku? But you're probably more likely to watch him on this new streaming network, which is called ESPN, which is a different conversation because now you have ESPN, the channel, and ESPN, the streaming service, and they're both called ESPN. And it's bothering me right now because I have to differentiate between the two.
um, Real quick, as we're getting out of here, I was looking at Twitter. Bucky Brooks from Fox. It's the time of year where you start to get the way too early power rankings, but let me run down his top 10 right now.
Okay.
Green Bay at 10, Detroit at 9, Minnesota at 8, Rams at 7, Chargers at 6, pretty high there. Baltimore's at 5, 4 is the Kansas City Chiefs, 3 is the Washington Commanders, 2 is the Buffalo Bills. He's got them at number 2 and number 1, of course, which understandably so. They're stacked and they're defending Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia Eagles. Joe Buck on, what was it, Today's Show? What channel? Or Good Morning America it was.
He was on Good Morning. No, Joe Buck would have been on Fox, wouldn't he?
Yeah, it was. No, was it
Okay.
Fox?
Maybe.
No.
I don't know.
Who does Monday Night Football now? ESPN?
Oh yeah, it's Good Morning America. Yeah,
it was Good Morning America. Anyway, he was asked for a Super Bowl prediction, and he did pick the Bills. Got to point that out there. He picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl. I do think you're going to, and again, it means absolutely jack shit, but it's always fun to look at. You're going get ready for another spring and summer where the Bills are in the top 5 of pretty much every single power rankings that you're going to see. Another quick note. People, we're doing a video here. This is also, of course, on audio, which, by the way, if you're watching this and you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. But on the audio side, go to Spotify, Apple, type in Talking Buffalo, and follow. People, I put a poll up there, and it's not a tiny sample size anymore. It's already over 500 votes about an hour and a half in. I asked people who consume podcasts, whichever ones you enjoy, sports, whatever it may be, what's your preferred method? Is it audio, whether it's Spotify, Apple, iHeart, whatever it may be, or is it video, YouTube? What would you think what's your pick? Like, where do you consume your podcast personally when you consume them? And what do you think the response would be in terms of percentage?
Well, I'm entirely audio. I don't do any video podcasts. And that's,
you don't
that's
even
more
watch
of
ours?
No, I don't. I listen. So when I listen to Pat Moran's Talking Buffalo podcast, I'm listening to it because I'm doing like other stuff while I'm doing it. And when I sit down and actually have time to like watch something and give my full attention to it, it's one episode of The Last of Us a week or something. So like that's just kind of where I am in my my media life with 2 kids doing 3 sports right now and all that stuff. But so I do audio only. I would expect that it's still at least like, I don't know, I would still say 80% are mostly audio and 20% are mostly video. But I don't know those numbers because we changed a little bit our podcast setup at SB Nation over the last 12 months. So I'm not 100% in on like what folks are doing with that.
Well, I'll say this. I personally still prefer audio. I would love people who consume this show. I'm grateful for everyone who does, but I would prefer that people listen to it, which is funny because it's so much more work to do the video. I talk to you all the time about these platforms and these graphics and the post-production stuff, yada, 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 but I actually prefer audio. I've shifted a little bit more towards video only because I spend so much time. This is my home studio, and I also work primarily my real jobs from home, and I'm here so much, and I got multiple monitors, so I constantly got YouTube up, and I'm just looking at videos. I'm like, oh, here's a podcast, and I'll watch. Like, I watch Locked On Bills with Joe Marino all the time now, or Sal, a lot of these guys. I watch them more now than I listen, which is a change for me. But anyway, it's 74.9, so 75% of people, based on about, like I said, over 500 people so far, 75% of people prefer audio over video. And I think primarily it's for the same reason you said. You can still do other things. You're driving in your car, you got them in your earbuds when you're on the treadmill at the gym or pretending that you're working out or whatever it may be, but it's still predominantly audio.
And not for nothing. I mean, that's a Twitter poll. there's a
Yep.
certain component of people that are on Twitter versus other social media platforms.
Very fair.
We tend to skew older than say like Instagram or TikTok or some of those other video platforms. And so I think that does change the results a little bit. So that's actually a little bit more towards audio or towards video than I thought it was going to be. So I would imagine your total audience is even more that way because of that
sure.
skewing of Twitter.
In a perfect world, I would have like video clips and stuff like that all over IG and TikTok and all that
Yeah.
stuff, but it would ultimately direct you to listening to the podcast because I'm just a much bigger fan of listening personally. And according to this poll, but you're right though, there's other factors too. Last thing, have you ever watched the TV series The Bear?
I haven't, but I saw you had a hot take on the Bear earlier
Yeah,
today.
and that hot take is not going over well. That's what I was going to say here to end this show. I am getting dragged on Twitter X right now because I said that so it's the fourth season is getting ready to debut. And I said I ain't got no interest in watching it. Some people I trust said the show was very overrated. So, and I'm getting dragged, man. There's a lot of people who really like that show. I was wondering if you were one of them. So anyway, yeah. Sorry, folks.
No.
If you like the Bear, I ain't gonna watch it though. Well, never say never. Never say never. But all right.
Yeah, my wife's a bigger fan of watching stuff like when it's all wrapped up or when it's further along. Like this, watching The Last of Us every week is like killing her right now. No pun intended. But like she likes watching stuff when it's like almost all done or all done.
Yeah, I like to binge too. The problem is it's hard to not get shit spoiled. And I keep it low key. Like I just binge both seasons of Severance, and somehow, some way, I managed to not really learn anything. And it was fun binging it, but now I got to wait probably a year and a half to 2 years, and then I got to wait every week. Yeah,
And that's why we haven't watched Severance.
yeah. It's worth it though, man. It is worth it. All right, guys, it's gonna wrap it up for today. Make sure you follow Matt on both X and also Blue Sky at Matt Rich Warren, of course. Check out SB Nation as always. Buffalo Rumblings for Bills fans specifically. Appreciate you, buddy.
Have a good one. Thanks.
All right, I will be back live actually Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Gonna have some Bills schedule reaction. I'm trying to coax Joe from Queens into joining me, but we'll see. One way or the other, though, I'll be back. So talk to you guys tomorrow.